Our second episode of Strange New Worlds is Children of the Comet. If you're hoping this is a mashup between Night of the Comet and Children of the Corn, you're going to be disappointed. We start in a desert on an alien world where the locals are trying to scratch out a living, but they take time to look up at the bright light in the sky, a comet. But while Uhura is excited about that and her invitation to the captain's cabin for dinner, Ortegas decides to fuck with her for no reason. I said all I had to say about her last time, so I'm going to let this pass without further comment. Anyone have anything to add?
No.
Good. This is the chief engineer. He wasn't on board last time. His name's Hemmer. And he's Enar. If you're thinking, that looks like a zombie Andorian, you're half right. Enar are a subspecies of Andorians introduced in Enterprise that are blind but have telepathic abilities and, for all intents and purposes, a spidey sense. It's easy to be called a miracle worker when you have supernatural abilities. So Pike tells a story, but Spock doesn't get why it's funny.
Sometimes, Mr. Spock, things go so badly, you just have to laugh.
No kidding, I've spent 15 years looking at Voyager. You don't need to convince me. During the mingling, Pike talks with Uhura, who says that she speaks 37 languages, which is theoretically possible in a society that expects unwilling children to know calculus. Still, the jump from 15 on her record to 37 tells me this is probably some resume padding. I immediately thought of that guy in South Africa they kept using to do sign language interpretation. Despite his clear lack of knowledge of sign, they said, what's the worst that could happen? And then one day he's standing next to U.S. President Barack Obama giving a eulogy for Nelson Mandela, and they realized, hey, you know what? Maybe our interpreter shouldn't be someone who learned everything by watching a third base coach. Tangent, perhaps. Well, what the hell? I do them all the time. In fact, here's another one. When I think of these big-time polyglots, I always think of a book I read by the late Barry Farber, who claimed knowledge of 25 languages. He said the easiest language to learn, bar none, is Indonesian. In that language, a man is orang, and if you want to speak of men, you just say orang, orang. You just say it twice if you mean more than one. The ape on the island is a man of the forest, so it's called orang-hutan. Although, if he's also a librarian, don't call him a man any more than you'd call him a monkey, or else you'll soon declare, your wife is a big hippo. There, this is what you get if I don't complain about Ortegas. Take it or leave it. Where Uhura steps in it is being too honest, and when asked about her future, says she actually is not sure if that means Starfleet. It's kind of like doing spring training with the Yankees and saying you're not sure if baseball is really your thing. Pike takes that graciously, though, but Spock less so. He appreciates the honesty, but he thinks that taking this opportunity when you're not sure about it is basically denying it from someone who does. While that's being noodled on, Pike and Una talk about his future and whether he might be able to change it. But they'll have to wait. The comet is a harbinger of doom. By which I mean, if we look at its path, we can see that it's going to cause doom. It's not predicting that we have some horrible future coming. I mean, yes, I know Pike does have a terrible future coming, but the comet didn't predict that. This isn't the Dark Ages where the arrival of a comet means that some disaster is coming, any more than you can see the future in a crystal ball. Pike didn't learn his future gazing into a crystal ball. He gazed into a regularly shaped crystal, okay? Shit. Spock says that, according to their simulations, the comet is going to hit the planet and wipe out all life there, including that pre-warp civilization we saw. Because only a monster would say that doing nothing and letting them be wiped out is enlightened, we're going to try to divert its course to avoid the planet. There's just one problem. The comet has a shield, and it stops their photon torpedoes from adjusting its trajectory. That, by the way, ends the teaser. Wow, that is one long teaser. That's not even teaser anymore. That's just edging. After the titles, number 1 says that while there's no life on the comet, there's an alien structure there, and that's where Kirk comes in. Turns out that was a fake-out last time. The Lieutenant Kirk that Pike was referring to is Jim Kirk's brother Sam, the one with the porn stash. He knows exobiology, see? So he's going to beam down to the structure along with Spock, La'an, and Uhura.
surface of the comet is bombarded by ridiculously high levels of cosmic rays.
My medical research into this is sketchy, but I believe that Spock will become rubbery, Uhura will turn invisible, Sam will be able to create fire, and La'an will turn into a rock monster. They head over and investigate the structure, finding a big lump with markings on it. Sam figures the best thing to do is ignore everyone and walk up to it, which does cause it to light up, but all too soon... Yeesh, when are you ever going to learn, Sam? Poking about here and there. Get back to Earth. Space is going to be the death of you, mark my words. Well, luckily for hold my beer while I try this place has a breathable atmosphere. Awfully considerate of the comet. But it won't let them beam out. The shield is back. So they're going to have to stabilize him themselves. Emphasis on stabilize, meaning they need to get him back to the ship so a real doctor can look at him. And that's going to mean lowering the shield. And that likely means cracking the code. So while Spock tells Uhura to put aside her I don't know if I want to be here vibes and solve this, over on Enterprise, Pike asks for suggestions, and Ortegas and Una come up with using a phaser at the right frequency to cause the comet to just shatter. Yes, the away team is standing on it, but they're in spacesuits. They'll probably be fine. Probably. Besides, this doesn't sound like it's going to work anyway. The moment people learn about resonance, that's the moment they seem to think the world is made out of wine glasses. The planet doesn't get a chance, because a ship full of gray aliens with chin-strap beards shoot them first. They are the shepherds, escorting the comet, which they call Mahanit, and they don't like people fucking with it.
If it is his will to bring life, he will bring life. If Mahanit wills the planet to die, even chooses to die with it, then that is what will happen.
Okay, this is what we in diplomacy call an impasse, and that means as the ship with the bigger guns, I guess you win. Not good enough. The away team, oh yeah, they know all about them. The away team are a blasphemy for tromping through the temple. Don't try to rescue them or shit's gonna go down. Uhura's not doing well in there, so Spock tries a pep talk. About a 3 on the scale, but it's something. The idea here is that she's without her heart fully in it, and that's what's undermining her self-confidence. It's his application of logic that seems to work better. That hypotheticals, woulda, coulda, shoulda, they don't matter right now. We are all here now. She's the person for the job. This is what she's been trained for. She's the one who will get them out of this or die trying. Don't do that last one, please. When she gets back to work, Spock notices that her humming starts causing a reaction in the walls, and it even sends out a signal matching it that the Enterprise picks up. From that, they deduce that the music is a code.
You double that frequency and you get the same pitch an octave higher. That's the 2 in our code.
Triple the frequency and you get a perfect 5th. 5 times the frequency is a major 3rd.
You know, if this is being broadcast, I wonder how the aliens feel about them singing at their god comet.
But this is more blasphemy. Have any of you even heard of anyone playing music for our Comet Lord?
Well, I heard there was a secret chord. Supposedly it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you? I'll shut up now. Well, a comet must like that because it opens up its Fabergé egg, and Uhura sings a little bit more, and that brings the shield down. That's completing a mission with style right there, I've got to say. However, even though they're no longer trespassing over on the comet, the shepherds are pissed off and decide to express this by firing at them. Lon says they need to warp out of this mess and regroup, and Una agrees. But Spock takes the moment to say that the comet was attempting to communicate something, possibly something helpful. But Uhura has exhausted her miracles for the day. She's not pulling a translation out of her ass before that comet hits the planet over there. They're going to have to hit the weapons on the Shepherd ship to buy themselves a little time to think of an actual plan. But only a little.
Initiating evasive pattern Ortegas Gamma 1.
Oh, okay, well, what could possibly go wrong with this plan?
Could you possibly try not to hit every single one?
They fly into the comet debris, and sure enough, the shepherds stop firing. It's not a good idea to shoot your god. Pike offers to surrender as opposed to crashing into their god comet, and during their rescue, Spock heads in using a shuttle to radiate heat that will cause sublimation, which will nudge the comet's course away from the planet enough to avoid it. As a side effect, the broken-off piece enters the atmosphere, adding enough moisture to alter the planet's climate for the better, sparing the planet and giving it life. So the shepherds call up to gloat, but then say bygones and take off. Well, it seems that they had a good reason to gloat. Uhura cracked the message, and it's a course showing the comet's trajectory would miss the planet and drop its package into the atmosphere, even describing the exact shape of the ice chunk. To be fair, this wouldn't have worked if Spock hadn't done his thing, but nevertheless, the comet predicted the future, but not a dire one. My point still stands. Spock is so impressed overall that he stops Uhura to tell her so, and that if she stays, Starfleet would be lucky. That's a hopeful thought, as is Una's insistence that Pike's vision of the future doesn't have to be preordained. It can be whatever he chooses. So he starts to think on that, and we'll have to see where that goes. I mean, I've seen enough prequels to know continuity gets dicked with all the time. Children of the Comet is the settling in episode, much more about making us aware of who they are than about the actual plot. Uhura, of course, is the one who gets this the most, substantially adding to her background while dovetailing with much of what we do know. The language thing, expanding on the so-called Kelvinverse version, contradicts the Star Trek VI gag, but I'm willing to let it go. Even at the time, Nichelle Nichols said that it stretched credulity that the comm officer wouldn't know the language of their greatest enemy. But beyond that, everyone has at least one moment to either establish themselves or show their relationships with another crew member, like Pike in number 1. Props for Hemmer in this one. Patreon members might recall me discussing the much-hyped casting of a blind performer for Doctor Who, and that the performance was subpar to the point that the only believable thing about it was that the character was blind, which, as established, wasn't acting. Well, let me tell you, Bruce Horrick is the exact opposite of that situation. His performance as Hemmer is and will remain a standout part of the show. His sole scene in this episode is highly memorable and fun. In much the same way after the first season of Game of Thrones that Peter Dinklage went from being a great little person actor to just a great actor, Bruce Horrick comes across as just a great actor. Back to the episode itself, though, its story is a thinly veiled excuse for character stuff, but taken on those terms, it works. This show isn't serialized, but it's a developing program, and I think that's a good thing.
Someone match my pitch.
One. No, help her. I'll break the thing.